Welcome back to the Hoke Dems podcast, the go-to source for fresh ideas and insights into making our great state of North Carolina even better. Today, we're thrilled to have a good friend to Hoke County with us tonight. Daniel Franch is the Regional Organizing Director for the Piedmont region for the North Carolina Democratic Party. A proud North Carolinian, Daniel has been the driving force behind the State Party's Project 100 initiative in our neck of the woods. We've been working with Daniel for a few months now, and we're excited to have him on the podcast. So thank you for joining us tonight, Daniel.
Happy to be here. Humbled to be here. Super excited about our upcoming canvases.
Why don't we start with you? Tell us a little about yourself. So from North Carolina, but, give us your story.
Absolutely. So basically, I grew up in Johnston County, but also spent a lot of time in Wake County. Just growing up, because my parents both worked there. I kind of have a background as a former compassionate conservative in a previous life. I was my mother was the only Democrat in our family growing up, and I was strongly influenced by my father's more socially and fiscally conservative political views, just given his upbringing and background, just being from northern Italy in a small old world, pretty devout Roman Catholic Italian American family. And just the way he was raised in New York City and whatnot, and just some circumstances there. But I really, kind of changed though, like because of my Boy Scout troop at Edenton Street United Methodist Church in Raleigh. I was a Cub Scout since the second grade, and really, I don't think that influenced me tremendously, given that I had fellow scouts and adult leaders who were, of all political persuasions. It was probably 50-50 split looking back on it, I would say. I mean, we had Bob Phillip, who is actually the executive director of Common Cause. I actually was in the same Boy Scout troop with his son growing up, and it was interesting. Sometimes I remember vividly, we were getting ready to go on a camping trip one Saturday, and he rode in the same vehicle as another scout and his father, who was, a little bit more blue collar and just or conservative kind of a guy, and turned on Rush Limbaugh on the radio just to piss Bob off a little bit. And I thought that was just funny. We had some, interesting scenarios where during the 2004 election, I remember we were in the church van driving to go camping on a weekend, and I was arguing on behalf of George W. Bush. And then my good friend with whom I went to elementary school with, was like one of my best friends named Kirk, was like, saying, no, we got to support John Kerry and John Edwards. And it was just kind of like, to me, a microcosm of like that paradox of North Carolina politics and how we truly are a purple state. But I, would say that over time, I credit going to university really, and just through the professors and teachers I had, starting in high school and then, but also middle school and elementary, for really truly saving my life and broadening my horizons. And I especially, credit my German professors and history professors at East Carolina. And then, the folks I met in Germany through studying abroad twice in undergrad. And then for 2 years teaching English as a Fulbright English teaching assistant in former socialist East Germany in a small town called Dessau that's famous for the Bauhaus architecture school, but also had a Zyklon B factory and was, because of that, destroyed, about 85% destroyed by British Anglo and American bombers on March 7th, 45, and lost a lot of the beautiful architectural, like half timber frame houses, including where Moses Mendelssohn was born, whose son Felix Mendelssohn Bartholdy spent a lot of time in neighboring Leipzig composing music. And I really just, through there, I kind of learned the importance of tolerance in terms of religious tolerance, because growing up, I guess just in the Roman Catholic faith, my father, for example, he had, and I had some friends who went on to St. Thomas More Academy, like another private school. And, some scouts of my Boy Scout troop who went to some private schools in the Raleigh area. And I just look back and think about, the situation now with public education and how we have Republicans like Tim Philberger and Tim Moore who are, trying to allow millionaires to send their kids to schools like, St. David's, Cardinal Gibbons, and other private schools, when we have counties that are struggling to retain, good teachers. That's what really, has kind of led me actually into the Democratic Party. Started through studying abroad in Germany and seeing the policies of progressive ideas in action through especially large support of wind, solar, and other alternative energies, and just, more progressive and practical. I call it pragmatic, business progressivism, a la Jim Hunt, Terry Sanford, and other good Democrats of days gone by, where, we have to understand that we cannot just eliminate corporate taxes to zero, because business leaders also value having a strongly, developed, highly skilled and highly educated workforce. And basically, in a previous life, I used to teach high school history after I came back from Germany, and just experiencing the situation of, our education system in a classroom in Granville County. That's what kind of led me to organize during the pandemic when schools were shut down. And I just had teacher burnout and wanted to fight back against the GOP war on public education. And so I've always, had a lot of respect for, Democrats and, the policies of Governor Hunt. Enjoyed meeting Bev Perdue in the previous life back after she was elected governor. But I'm just, happy to be here organizing in Johnston County. Clayton area is where I live, just in the downtown. And I'm really excited by the prospects of, growth in our exurban counties, but also our more rural counties.
Yeah, absolutely. A man after my own heart who was also infected with the woke mind virus at college and, learned there are other people with other ideas. And yeah, it's an eye-opening experience. I do have to make a, little bit of inside baseball. I do not normally do the introductions, and that's the reason why is I left William unintroduced. William Munn, our chairman, our fearless leader. I left him unintroduced. William, I am sorry. This is why you don't let me run things. Just absolute shambles to start. How are you doing tonight, William?
No worries at all, man. No, I thought everything has gotten off to a wonderful start. I'm unimportant. I'm just happy to be here, y'all. Daniel, that was incredible. It's so fascinating to hear your journey, how you arrived here. And it sounds like, I often argue that I wish we had those Republicans of a Republican Party was, at least a shadow of itself of what it was back in 2004. I don't think they would be doing the things that they're doing now. And it's fascinating that public education was the thing that really split your switch. And I think, certainly a loss to North Carolina, public school systems. But, the Democratic Party has certainly been, has benefited from you being a part of it. I can't help but to sort of ruminate on one of the things you said around public education being the thing that flipped your switch and introduced you to other people, and how, unfortunately, some of the folk from your camp, from your Boy Scout troop or Cub Scout troop, went on to public school, and sounds like they weren't exposed to other people, and so they grew up with a very insular and myopic mindset. But how going to school and being in touch and being exposed to different cultures and people really broaden your mind. And this is a question for all of us to sort of jump into. I remember back, this had to be about 10, 15 years ago, Wake County was having a conversation about whether or not the bus kids across, their school district lines, so that they could be more integrated even more integrated than they were. And Wake County parents sort of shot that down. And so I think one of the things I learned in political science class was that, we no longer have de jure segregation, but we do in fact have de facto segregation, where folk are, making the choice to not be a part of the greater society. And public schools are that thing. Our neighborhoods are not so segregated that you would never be in contact with someone from a different faith or background than yours. It does feel like what Phil Brigger and Tim Moore are doing, thoughts and ideologies separate. It's hard to do that. And so I think they're using private school vouchers and while at the same time demonizing public schools to achieve and to really incentivize the sort of de facto segregation that we're seeing. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
I could take an early stab. So my wife was listening to me rant about a couple days ago about, we focus so much on the death of like the American city in the 1960s and 70s during deindustrialization, which left the Rust Belt, when jobs went overseas, when tax receipts, after the 1968 Fair Housing Act, which effectively desegregated, at least legally, housing, which led to white flight to the suburbs, the whole death of the city. But we don't talk enough about how that also led to the death of the rural community, right? So at the same time that these manufacturing jobs are moving overseas, you're having suburbs get set up, and that's pulling, the people who would stay in rural communities, who would run the general store, running the local businesses, et cetera, et cetera. Those people are no longer living there. So at the same time the cities are dying, the rural communities are dying. And, rolled into that, the Fair Housing Act is the first civil rights act to fail in 1966. So it's the beginning of the civil rights movement. And it fails because it was the first one to apply to the entire country. And that is the last one really passed until 91. And the 91 Civil Rights Act is a bit of a nothing burger. So, legal segregation is over, exactly like you said, but like the informal type is still there, so as everyone knows, I'm a carpetbagger. I'm from Montana. We do not have fraternities and sororities at universities there. That is just absolutely not a thing. But what are the fraternities and sororities besides a way to keep segregation going? Like, not anymore. That's not a universal statement. But like, my understanding of it, at least, that, if William tried to join a specific fraternity when you were in undergrad, you probably would not have been made to feel welcome. Is that a outrageous statement?
So yeah, no, we no, absolutely, it's crazy. I'm a member of a fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, which was designed because in 1906 at Cornell University, because African Americans were not made to feel welcome at Cornell, and two, certainly couldn't join any of the long-standing fraternities and sororities there. So yeah, no, 100%. If I went to Carolina, there was UNC, there would certainly be fraternities there that I would not be made welcome to feel a part of.
And, I think the private schools end up being, not universally, I'm not painting with too broad of a brush, but, you look at the development of the private school system in this country, and it really crops up after 1964, oddly enough. And, everyone knows me, I'm too outspoken, but I think sometimes just call a spade a spade.
No, you're not. No, you're not. I appreciate you.
Yeah, totally agree.
Race is a huge thing. Go ahead.
I was sorry to interrupt. I was just going to say I totally agree. When situation in Wake, and the parents, fought back tremendously on that and elected some new school board members who were like conservative and very much in opposition. I think several of them ended up getting booted out a few years like after 2011, but still though, that definitely was, made national headlines internationally even, I think. And I just look back, absolutely, private school education and even, for-profit charter schools. And it's interesting. I actually never attended a traditional public school before, but because I went to some public charter schools and then a Roman Catholic Sacred Heart Cathedral School in Raleigh from kindergarten through fifth grade. And like, while I appreciate, the values-based education and the fact that I got to meet some, families here in the Triangle from like who had Lebanese or African ancestry and, Filipino and whatnot because of the Roman Catholic faith and whatnot, I just don't agree with, the idea of, destroying our public schools in favor of privatizing, and private schools and for-profit charter schools, because, we've had a strong history of public education in North Carolina. And I believe vehemently in that exposure to people of different faiths and different ethnicities, different socioeconomic status that, really the public school, and public universities provide. And I think that for sure. That, that's what concerns me tremendously about what's been happening in North Carolina over the past decade with GOP control in Raleigh.
100%. And then on the Hoke Demos podcast, we call a spade a spade. I think I'm gonna steal that saying, Tyson, because we're gonna look back. I think Phil Berger and Tim Moore want to be remembered as the architects of some sort of conservative movement. And what really, I don't knock someone for wanting to have an impact. I think the impact they're trying to have is incredibly dangerous. And what saddens me about the Republican Party, particularly with that mindset, is that they bank on the worst in people. They bank on people's fears. They bank on people being afraid and suspicious of each other to make and frame their policy. Only a person who would be afraid of poor Black people or poor Latino people or failing schools would buy this garbage and decide to send their kids, I'm not going to say every case, but it's literally takes you knowing nothing about public schools and incredibly hardworking and trained and prepared people who love their job. Like, you have to love what you do to be in public education, but they bank, those leaders, or lack thereof, Tim Moore and Phil Berger, bank on the worst in human, in the human psyche to justify what it is they're trying to do. And they're betting that people will take their dollars, their tax dollars, and send their kids to school, all the while bankrupting public school, demonizing, public schools. And it's just a tragedy. And we all know what'll come of it, so it's truly sad.
Well, and the last thing you said, it also echoes something that Daniel said about, seeing the schools defunded. It's so short-sighted. Even if, okay, I hate taxes, I hate the government, I don't think that, poor kids, and I especially don't think poor Black or Latino kids deserve an education. Okay, so I'm going to cut their education money. But if I'm trying to make money, if I'm trying to, even just in the pure, most self-centered part of it, I need people who can read and do math and whatever else in order to run my businesses. It's just such a cutting off your nose to spite your face. Not having an educated workforce is a humongous problem. And it's just this is where we're going to attack it. This is where we're going to try to take the money. It's so insanely short-sighted, beyond the cruelty and the stupidity of it. Beyond the cruelty of it, just the stupidity of it is shocking.
I think that Moore and Berger are truly envious of the way North Carolina was built, going back to what Daniel said earlier, about the Terry Sanfords and the Jim Hunts. We really are a model Southern state, progressive in nature Southern state, and we were built to be friendly to business. I wish we had much more of a progressive history, but look, we laid some really strong bones, an independent, strong, reputable university system. And I think they're envious of it. And I think they want to remake North Carolina in their own image. And I think we as Democrats and we as, hardworking folk have to call it out for what it is. Because they're remaking it into something that is going to end up having us looking more like Alabama than a place like, New Jersey, New York, or what would be a good transitional site? Virginia is.
I always say Virginia. Virginia,
yeah. So look a lot more like Mississippi than Virginia. Maybe not New York, New Jersey. Yeah, we're all issues. Don't think they line up very well with us. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll leave it there.
Well, so after that cheery subject, here on Hoke Dems, we are all about discussing pivotal issues and invasive solutions. So Daniel, tell the listeners about Project 100 and the state party's plan to keep our state on the road to progress and make us more like a Virginia and less like a Mississippi.
The idea of Project 100 came about from really our, Project 100, I should say, is our NCDP year-round organizing program modeled off of Michigan Dems Project 83, and which has existed for, I think, 3-4 years now. This has gone through since 2018. It's been around. And they've had several cycles now where, they've had field staff that have been focused on training and organizing, really, especially supporting their down ballot candidates for local races, and also state House and state Senate races. Similar to also Wisconsin Dems year-round organizing program. Those are probably the two main Democratic state parties that are famous for their year-round organizing. I think Wisconsin Dems set the gold standard personally in their organizing efforts, and they've invested a lot of resources and staff to do so. But North Carolina, we have had our Project 100 program. It was kind of the birth of the new NCDP board, because unfortunately, NCDP had to lay off myself and 6 other former colleagues in December of 2022, and who were part of our previous year-round organizing program that was called Building Blue, as some folks may remember. But we were focused at that time, like we are now, on really supporting our down ballot candidates and state House and state Senate candidates, given that we have a lot of power to build. And we understand that, we have to, in order to build back power in North Carolina and, have that long game approach at taking power back in our state, especially at the court, at the judicial level on our courts, we're going to need to make sure that we are investing in the ground game and investing in training and organizing our county, precinct, district officers, and local neighborhood leaders. And it starts with organizing. And basically, I've been on the ground back with the state party since October of 2023. And I have been organizing in 34 counties in central North Carolina, so in the Piedmont region, with Hoke County being one. And we are working closely with our county party leaders to, at this time, focus on training folks on direct voter contact. And that mainly includes launching canvases, but also launching phone banks to recruit volunteers and build power at the neighborhood, precinct, and county party level.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, the article that, again, to give people a peek behind the curtain, William just shared an article in our little chat about the difference between the Biden and the Trump ground games right now, and how significant that is, and how significant it is to have people in the communities. And like you said, year round, we can't let it be all Midwest shout outs. Stacey Abrams down in Georgia, her program of that constant engagement, that having multiple touches with voters in every county, because every county in North Carolina matters. And I think that's awesome. That's what the state party and you were working on.
Yeah, I think we absolutely have to take our hats off to what's going on, what the party is doing to invest in and have a year-round presence, not a transactional presence. We had Dr. Hardy on last week. And Dr. Hardy, if you're listening to this, apologies. I'm going to return your phone call. I've been so busy. But the idea is multiple touches, multiple authentic touches. And, we're hearing in the community that criminal justice reform is a huge thing, expulsion clinics as a response to that, and job fairs for those who've been criminally justice involved in the past, doing things like, backpack drives, basketball tournaments, soccer tournaments, doing things that bring joy to people and bringing them into the fold. Some of the things we're going to be focusing on here in Hoke County. We're going to knock the doors. We're going to make the phone calls. But let's surround those things with joy. Let's do it year round. And I think people will recognize, it'll be able to cut through the noise. It'll give us an opportunity to cut through some of this just, insanity. But I think it's coming to bear. I don't want to step on any of the, wonderful topics. And we're going to probably talk about Arizona at some point. We should talk, about, I think it's been a major shift in the race that's only going to accelerate once, Trump's criminal charges trial is concluded. And, let's call, I know we don't want to focus only on Donald Trump, but so much of the atmosphere is driven by what he does and does not do. And I think that's a double-edged sword because he's created this persona of being invincible. And I think there's a lot of cracks that we've seen. One in the primary because of that embedded support for Nikki Haley that I'm sure hasn't necessarily melted away, to criminal charges that seem to be sticking and getting ready to evolve. So it's going to be fascinating next couple of months.
Absolutely. And I'm excited about, the fact that, the Biden campaign is opening 10 field offices here in North Carolina, which, I'd like to see some also in some rural counties, and I'm including here in the Sandhills. I noticed, for example, in some of the phone calls I've made recruiting for some of my first Project 100 Day of Action canvases, which started back on February the 10th, part of Dr. Hardy's idea following her Eastern tour that began in the spring of 2023, in which we were knocking doors and dropping literature with a Black History Month focus targeted at reaching Black voters in rural Eastern North Carolina. And I noticed that actually in a lot of counties, such as Scotland County, they had a headquarters in the 2012 election based on the data in our database. Also Richmond County and Anson, these counties in the San Luis Hoke County, especially Robeson County, I'd love to see like a field office and some investments from the Biden campaign, because we need to be organizing everywhere. And I'm excited, given that Chair Clayton mentioned that this is just the first wave and that the Biden campaign will be opening up more than just these 10 field offices.
Let's see. Yeah, you're right. And I would definitely, the nexus, there's a 401 corridor. So, Highway 401, runs from beyond Cumberland County, but certainly Cumberland County, Hoke County, Scotland County, and South Carolina. And it intersects at Highway 74, which of course picks up Robeson County and Richmond County. I think a centrally located Sandhills field office, Biden field office, may be something we could work out of as a group of counties at the permanent Scotland County headquarters. So they have a permanent office there would be a great thing. So hopefully Biden folk, y'all hear us. Let's make some investments. God, those counties are incredibly important. There are a lot of people who want to hear and see energy and organization, and they'll latch on because there are a lot of folk who are concerned. I was talking to my mother today, and we were talking about a lot of the noise and cutting through the noise about how, there's a lot of folk expressing their desire to sit on the sideline. And, she talked to me about how when she grew up, she's only 70, she'll be 71 in June. But she told me how in her lifetime, there wasn't Social Security for many of her great aunts and grandparents, people of their age, because when Social Security was created, it was the Southern senators had required that domestics and farmers not be able to be a part of that benefit. So as such, there were a lot of Black folk who did not have a chance to be, retire with dignity. You had to go live with their kids. And so she was just talking about that freely. I said, Mom, sit down and talk about this. I think folk laugh and giggle when Republicans threaten Social Security, but folk need to recognize, particularly in our community, that our parents may be living with us, our grandparents may be living with us, if we take our eyes off the prize and recognize, because the other side would love nothing more than to dismantle Social Security only because it was an FDR and, program. That's why you hear these entitlement talks or talk around entitlements, because it's they're trying to frame it as something that is excess, and it's unfortunate. And so the next thing will be slash the budget, and then we can't afford Social Security. So we have to be careful with these words and fight back as soon as we hear them, because we know what they're trying to do. We have to fight them. It's unfortunate, but we have to fight them every step of the way.
I think you're right. We have to start believing, believe what people tell you about themselves. If they talk about cutting entitlements, they are talking about your Medicare, your Medicaid, your Social Security. And if it's not affecting you directly right now, it's your future, it's your parents, your grandparents, your children. I mean, the Affordable Care Act can reach out and touch everybody, because the Patient Protection Act parts of it, back in the misty darkness times when pre-existing conditions could mean you couldn't have healthcare or not get treatment for it. No, I mean, it sort of dovetails nicely into the next topic about, they said they wanted to overturn Roe versus Wade since 1973, and they did it. And what has followed besides draconian abortion bans, criminalizing women's health care? Because a lot of it is that, it's doctors are afraid to perform even non-abortion procedures that are sort of related to it, because some of them are functionally the same thing. If you have a miscarriage and have to have the baby removed, fetus removed, that is functionally the same procedure as a DNC abortion. And doctors are afraid to do that. Well, that's a huge problem. Women are going to die and are dying because of that. We focused a lot on the negativity. I'd be curious to hear your take on what's the positive message. So we win the governor's race, we win the majority back in the legislature, in the Congress, and in the presidency. What are Democrats going to deliver? What do you guys think should be the priorities? What, from that sort of national to the state to the local, what would we do with power? What would we give people? What would we do for progress?
I'll say this one thing and I'll hop off because I want Daniel to speak to this. First thing we have to do is implement independent redistricting commissions across the country. We cannot allow one side or the other to draw district lines. We'll forever have misrepresentation or obtuse representation in one direction or the other. And we don't want that. I don't want it for Democrats. I don't want it for Republicans. Because what is created for the Republicans is an echo chamber and a situation where they're eating their own, and the very worst ideas and worst candidates are rising to the top, i.e. Michelle Morrow and the rest. Like, they're running there. I think a lot of their candidates, statewide candidates, are going to lose terribly. But they're giving an outside because of this radicalization. The right has become violently extreme, and we're seeing that in the candidates that they nominate and for elected office. And I think they're going to lose terribly. I think we saw in the Quinnipiac poll, I think, Josh Stein had a 52-47, lead over Mark Robinson. I think that's only likely to grow. A couple of weeks ago, we saw an initial poll that had Robinson ahead. And I think people are starting to figure out just how extreme and unprepared he is. I don't want that. I don't want one person saying, let's say, the public schools and talk about environmental protections, and the other person talking about women shouldn't vote. I don't want that. That's not healthy. That's like having a marriage about, hey, baby, we should pay the mortgage. No, we should go party for the next 3 years. And it's literally where we are, in this relationship. So let me shut up.
Yeah, totally agree. I think, we need to, part of it is going to be involving, young people more so, and engaging with young voters. As I actually just read that article that you dropped in our chat, William, which I love, reading so much to kind of get insight into what's happening in other battleground states too, which and I think, going after making sure that we are reaching out to and engaging with young voters, especially who have, and just voters writ large, which is why Project 100 is going to be so important, because a lot of folks are not aware of the benefits, and the huge wins that, Biden, Harris, Cooper, have achieved for the people here in North Carolina over the past 4 years through the, starting with the American Rescue Plan and moving on with the bipartisan infrastructure law, the child tax credit, affordable connectivity program, and the Inflation Reduction Act. And it's just, we need to be out there chatting with voters with, based on the conversations I've had canvassing since February the 10th. A lot of voters, as that article from NBC points out, do not know about these amazing, extremely successful pieces of legislation. And that's why, investing in direct voter contact, like the North Carolina Democratic Party is doing this early, going back to last October, where we helped get out the vote for municipal elections and help, we're directly responsible for flipping the Huntersville Town Council from red to blue, electing our first African-American town councilwoman here in my hometown of Clayton, Gretchen Williams. by knocking on doors and making phone calls. And just want to give a huge shout out to all the, the folks in Hoke County who are doing this work, and our AOs, such as the Democratic Women and the Young Democrats in North Carolina, because we have got to, and others, because we've got to be reaching out to these, constituency groups year round, given that a lot of folks haven't necessarily seen the benefit of the Inflation Reduction Act and or bipartisan infrastructure law in their daily lives. And that's why I'm passionate about, in a volunteer capacity, like engaging with young voters in Johnston County, the Triangle region, and across the state. We've really, I've been really excited to see the growth of the new young Dems in Wilson, Nash, and Edgecombe counties over the past several months now. And I think, engaging with and empowering young Democratic and, yes, I like to say progressive unaffiliated voters, and also maybe even reaching out to some of those never Trump Republicans who do exist, is going to be so important, because we're going to win the state back on the margin.
That's right, man. Yeah, that's right.
It's the only way we're ever going to flip it. I mean, there are a lot of people in Wake County, a lot of people in Durham County, a lot of people in Mecklenburg County, but not enough to flip the legislature. So, like, just as like a, whenever someone asks, oh, well, are young voters the future? Well, I mean, given the linear nature of time, yes. But in the same way, could you control the legislature with Raleigh, Durham, and Charlotte? No, you cannot. And, it's finding the things, the crossover that connects us and the things that we can unite around, whether that's a hatred of Donald Trump, a love of Social Security, or the environment. It's finding those connections. And, you're exactly right. It's one-on-one. It's speaking to someone, treating them like they're a person, a fellow citizen, and finding that space and bringing them into the tent. We're not like the Republicans, where if you don't pass the exact purity test and look a certain way, you're not welcome here. We're the Democratic Party. We're for everyone. And we want to improve everyone's lives by doing it together. Like, it's an easy message. We have the easy job of, we're not the crazies doing this, Again, you listen to a Mark Robinson speech and you're just thinking, like, what on earth is this guy talking about? That's got to be a tough going door to door for old Mike.
You said something nice that I 100% agree with. I think it speaks volumes here in Hoke County. The fact that we don't want to run North Carolina from Raleigh, Durham, Charlotte, Greensboro, Winston-Salem. I mean, we want the values from Hoke County, from Robeson County, from Bertie County, all to shine through and be reflected in the legislature. And so if we put too much stock in those values, we won't represent the entire state. One of the things that, that the Republicans want to do is make urban and rural North Carolina so different, or appear so different, that there's no way that we can see each other, when that's clearly not the case. One of the arguments that I make in response to the fact that we don't have light rail in the state is because it would connect communities. It would connect Clayton and Wilson and all these other communities to Raleigh, and they'd find out quickly that, wait a minute, these people aren't aliens, and they're people that I like to have coffee with and have good times. Yeah, it's cool.
I spend too much time driving on 401 thinking, God, if there was a light rail that was in the middle of 401 between the four lanes, oh my goodness. Could you imagine being in Fayetteville in 10 minutes? I mean, other places have done it. There's no reason we have made a decision to deprive ourselves of that.
There you go. Say that one more time. We made a decision to not. Yeah, say that one more time. That's powerful.
We made a decision to deprive ourselves of that.
That's it.
We deprive our communities of that. Oh, get me fired up, William.
That's it. No, that's right, man.
I think now would be a good time to, shift to everyone's favorite part of the podcast, which is just general wittering from three armchairs about the state of things, what's in the news, and the politics. So, William, if you have one ready.
Yeah, I thought, once the Arizona Supreme Court, I think they handed the General Democratic Movement, the People's Movement, a huge win. I think right after the next day, it forced Donald Trump to sort of give this, and what I think is hindsight, just a really bad he sort of endorsed states' rights and existing draconian abortion policy while trying to make himself seem as though he wouldn't, sign the federal abortion ban, which is nuts that it's even a policy option for the Republicans in the first place, given the butt kicking they got in 2022. I mean, let's call it what 2022 actually was. They were supposed to mop the floor with us, given every economic indicator, every poll indicator. They were supposed to kill us, and they didn't. In a large part because of their stances on it, but on abortion, and they continue to refuse to moderate. So yeah, I just want to get y'all's, first of all, I want to get what was your first impression when you heard, when you saw that tweet or newsflash? And now that we've had some time to sort of think about it, what impact do you think it's going to have on the race?
I'll take the first. So my first thought was, if you don't think elections matter, if you don't think your vote matters, the Attorney General of Arizona won by 400 something votes, and she is not going to enforce that law. Women will have access to care in Arizona because 450-ish people, if memory serves. We'll get our fact checkers on that right now. And that's what it came down to. So elections matter. I think Ruben Gallego, after he, confirmed that women were going to have access to healthcare, I like to imagine he probably did a little happy dance because, that went from probably a lean D to, that's a likely Democratic seat. I mean, we're good. All right, time to move on. But it's proof of the salient. I think it's proof of the salient for the issue. I'm Sherrod Brown in Ohio. I'm glad that abortion referendum was on the ballot last year because that infrastructure is still in place. Nevada, Florida, and Wisconsin. Don't hold me to that. Are doing similar, having abortion. Oh, Montana. So John Tester, my man. Every 6 years, he gives you 7 reasons to vote for John Tester, and at the 7th reason, he holds up that mangled claw of a hand and shows you the 7th reason. Love John Tester, but Montana's going to have an abortion amendment on the ballot, and that's going to help John Tester win. Not that he needs it because John Tester's a rock star, but if I'm Indian, if I'm Jackie Rosen in Nevada, if I'm Ruben Gallego in Arizona, once I kind of move past the horror and the reality of it, I'm kind of going, God, are they really this dumb? Are they just going to hand me these elections over and over and over? It is such an unpopular position. It's so extreme. Fine, yeah, keep running on it, please. Mike Pence had a big tweet about how Trump wasn't going far enough, and I almost retweeted Mike Pence. I couldn't because I have dignity and respect for myself, but I thought about it. But that's enough from me. What do you think, Daniel?
Oh, I totally agree with both you gentlemen. I think, we saw, based on the polling in 2022, or how it turned out, that, abortion drove support-based Democratic supporters and progressive leading unaffiliated supporters to the polls in droves. The Roe v. Wade was overturned. I mean, we saw a massive uptick in mostly female volunteers who here in Johnston County started signing up on our mobilized volunteer forum. Every day, there were probably 4 or 5 plus people. It was insane. I was on PTO, vacation on Cook Island when Roe v. Wade was overturned, and we had a phone bank, Roe v. Wade Day of Action, to kind of drum up some energy. And I remember we had some Democratic candidates, not just in North Carolina, who, thinking about my friend Mark Speed up in Franklin County, who, were a little bit hesitant to tap into the pro-choice mantra and theme in their campaign speeches because of concerns. But it came back to really bite them in the rear end because, that is what drove so many folks to volunteer for Sherry Beasley and Democrats up and down the ballot in North Carolina and other states. And, I think women are going to show their power in November. I just, continue to hope, based on the energy that we have seen just from knocking on doors and the conversations I've had, in anywhere from rural North Carolina, such as Staunton County or Richmond counties, and then Saturday in Hoke County. I'm sure that, we're going to have some similar feedback. but also, just in more urban counties like Southern Wake, even right after Michelle Morrow's, mega extremist comments, came to light about, executing former and current elected officials, folks were absolutely, just appalled by that. And I hope that we're going to see, the GOP far right obsession with taking, rights away and limiting abortion access come to bite them badly, given, you know, all that's at stake. And I think I've seen from, some young Dems who, are not all necessarily super enthusiastic about all of our Democratic candidates. I think a lot of them are really excited though about, or scared to death about losing their rights and like our decline back into, the medieval era here in North Carolina and the country. And so I'm really, energized based on that news that is, we see out of Arizona, but it's also scary every single day to see, that Republicans want to take us back so far and eliminate so much progress.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I have a light one. So after the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, accidentally struck a World Central Kitchen convoy, killing several people, including an American volunteer, the Biden administration, to be fair to them, kept in line with what they have been saying the entire time about aid. It just put a little bit more pressure on the Netanyahu sort of administration in Israel to open up more humanitarian aid, to open up more, or to refine their targeting procedure. I won't get too much more into it than that. But on the foreign policy front, do you think that Biden's slow move to apply more pressure is going to hurt him in November? Do you think that he'll get credit for doing it now? I mean, it's the hardest question in politics because A, does anyone really care about foreign policy when you're actually at the ballot box? And then B, are the people who are really up in arms about it, were they always sort of never Biden folk and they were just waiting for their first excuse to jump off? Yeah, I don't know. What do y'all think about that?
I think it's the latter. I think they were never Biden people, and they were looking for the first excuse. I've had conversations with some of these folks, and it's not a situation where you have what was the moderate governor from Ohio?
DeWine?
John
Not DeWine. Kasich. It's not like you have John Kasich on the other side. It's not that.
Yeah.
Robert Kennedy's never going to win.
He's a lunatic.
So when you have this conversation that and you have this indignant anger, it just doesn't pass the sniff test. And I think there are absolutely folk who are just never Biden, burn it all down. And there are a lot of people who, really have African Americans really have been against the system, from the beginning. And a lot of times I ask you, are you really ready to burn it all down? I get there is systemic and entrenched racism and just all these issues and issues that, hold people of color back. I understand that. I'm frustrated by it every day. But are you ready to grow your own food? Are you ready to fend for yourself? That's where we would be if you decide to burn it all down. And, folks start stammering over their words. That's not what's going to happen. We're just holding people accountable. You can hold people accountable, but not handing the election to Trump. It's a super weird and frustrating situation. I get very shaking, angry about it because I have kids and I can't conceive of what this country would look like 2 years after Trump got reelected. Like, I just can't. And for someone to be, and when you start asking them deep questions about foreign policy, stuff doesn't start to add up, And so it makes you really wonder what the motivation is. And I know when I'm thinking from an anecdotal perspective, but I've really tried to get a good sense of what people were coming from. When people call him Genocide Joe, I mean, come on, though. I mean, so
It's ridiculous. Like you can think that the Israelis have been heavy-handed. You can think that like the IDF needs to take a serious look at the way it's operating because the amateurish nature of this operation has been shocking. But genocide show? Like, I mean,
genocide.
how can you say that with a serious face? I mean, it's completely unserious.
Mm-hmm. It's Russian propaganda, I know for sure. It's really, or propaganda that people are spouting out. It's just people are just cook, line, and sinker with it. But yeah, I mean, blows my mind. And yeah, I can get people sitting out or contemplating sitting out because they live in a rural community. Nothing has changed over the last 4 years. They can't get a job. All right, I can talk to you, and I can at least move you through a process and have a conversation about this is what we can do. First of all, how can I help you from a constituent services perspective to help you get on your feet? Because clearly you're hurting if you're feeling that way. I get that. I still disagree with and I'm going to try to convince you to be a part of the process, but I get it. But when you start talking about genocide, Joe, no. And I don't think we should waste time with people like that because they have their own agenda and issue.
How about you?
Yeah. I mean, and this issue, like, I know it's been poignant for me to watch because I have a former colleague who is, Palestinian American, and she is, I can't imagine, just the heartbreak and the concern, and just, the frustration with what has been happening to, her, people and her, and so I know she's taken this situation since October the 7th, very, harshly, and has said on, her social media some very not unfriendly things about Democrats and President Biden. But like, I think back to, just what, you both said already, that to me it's personal, and it gets me really upset because when I see folks who, use that phrasing, genocide Joe, or just, try to, even going after Secretary of State Antony Blinken because, we're out here, dealing with the Russians who are calling Ukrainians Nazis and, trying to stand up for democracy. And, although I am not personally, I don't agree with, I don't feel comfortable with Benjamin Netanyahu, I just, one also has to understand that Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East, in a region that, the United States, albeit and other, Western countries like Great Britain and France really did a lot of damage to, in terms of, ever since World War One, and just breaking up, dividing countries' borders based, in no regard to ethnic identity. So, I also, just given my passion for history and foreign policy, I know that, the United States has not really played the right hand of cards in the Middle East. But at the same time, to me, it all goes back to what we have as a stark contrast between going back and down the road of fascism. If we reelect Donald Trump and far right Republicans like Mark Robinson, and saving our Constitution and saving our, democracy as we know it by re-electing President Biden, Vice President Harris, and electing more Democrats to the Council of State and the General Assembly, and critically those local county boards of commission and school boards, where truly a lot of local, issues and public policies are decided on everything from, infrastructure, public safety, trash collection, parks, and, list schools, and the list goes on. And so that's why I think I try to, whenever I hear, criticism about Biden's age and or just, foreign policy criticisms in light of the situation in Gaza, I try to remind folks about, what's at stake in the local situation on the ground here, and the fact that, all politics has to be decided by taking action and making sure that we're electing leaders here who will try to improve our community here at home, but also abroad.
100%.
Absolutely. Well, it's worth like just highlighting that contrast, A talking point that I've been using a lot recently is talking about, the perennial question, is your life better now than it was 4 years ago? Well, 4 years ago in April 2020, during Trump's mismanaged lockdown, that's been my thing. Trump's lockdowns, because he was president. His terrible mismanaged lockdowns. I was sitting in my house and 1,000 Americans were dying every day. Is my life better than it was 4 years ago? Yeah, I'd say a bit. Like, it is, similarly just ludicrous to say, oh no, it was better 4 years ago. Better how? Like, we couldn't leave our houses. And oh, the lockdowns, the COVID restrictions. Yeah, because we had clowns leading us who couldn't organize and like maybe think through the policies, the procedures, and what we were doing. And yeah, like, I also get fired up when people, oh, Joe Biden's old. Okay. Look, if it's weekend of Bernie's and they pass another infrastructure deal, fine. Like, I think it's going to pontificate for just a second. I think it's a difference between conservatives and liberals, Republicans, Democrats. I don't care about Joe Biden. I think he's a nice guy. He seems like a good person. I'd love to meet him, shake his hand, whatever. He's been a great president. But I don't care about him. Like, if he decided tomorrow, oh, hey, I decided I'm too old, Kamala Harris is going to do it. Okay. Like, no dramas. They're great. But whereas on the right, it's like, no, Donald Trump is the guy. What does he stand for? Don't care. Donald Trump. What, can anyone name one RFK Jr. policy? So, vaccine ? I mean, it's the cult of personality. It's the person. Whereas like liberals, like, I don't care. Like, yeah, I really like Roy Cooper. I think Governor Cooper is fantastic. If it came out tomorrow that Governor Cooper did something bad, I'd be like, that was bad, Governor Cooper. I don't like you anymore. And I would move on with my life and still vote for Josh Stein in 7 months. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe there's something there. Maybe I'm just littering. It's near the end.
I love it. I 100% love it. Donald Trump in 2022, in regards to some comments around Hunter Biden's laptop said he would, the Constitution's archaic. We should terminate it. So that's where we are. We're and so to me, we face a very clear choice, and I am off. I as a member of the African American community, a community that's been violently oppressed, and I understand the fear and terror of Palestinian Americans. So I don't want, in my earlier comments, I don't want to sound like I'm being insensitive to the plight of the Palestinians at all. I don't want to, and at the same time, I don't think we should be blaming Joe Biden for 90 years of bad policy in the Middle East. I think we can do well.
And the complexity, the nuances of the complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's why, and everyone knows that. Anyone over the age of 25 knows there's so many levels of complexity. So saying genocide Joe, you're not like you all said, you're not being serious.
No, and it's the whole, and Daniel, you said one of the most important parts of it. You said October 7th, and one of the moments of like really highlight Joe Biden was after October 7th, when he advised, look at the mistakes we made after 9/11. As someone who spent a year in Iraq as part of one of those mistakes, or as a result of one of those mistakes, is probably a better way to say that. I'll tell you, like, yeah, there were mistakes. You do dumb things in anger. You do dumb things in revenge. You do poor policy decisions because you're just so focused on the now. And that advice from from President Biden was transcendent. And it's too bad that Benjamin Netanyahu was so afraid of facing a court for his corruption charges that he's willing to commit these crimes and these horrible things against Palestinian people and using October 7th to remaining cover for it. So now, exactly what you said, William, I don't want to diminish what the Palestinians are going through, but, it's big time for people who can hold two thoughts in the head at the same time. On these cheery notes, I think we are at an hour and we should wrap up. We really kept it light this week for everyone. And that's in anticipation of our first day of canvassing in Hoke County coming up this Saturday, the 13th. So hope to see all of you at the Hoke County Library at 10 a.m. for a good day of canvassing. And then again, because the way this podcast will come out, actually signing up and being prepared for the April 27th one, which will be even bigger, even better. And we just want to thank Mr. Franch for joining us tonight, for setting those canvassing ups, for harassing me into going to canvassing training and learning how to do it. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. Is there anything, final words of wisdom?
Absolutely. So, folks want to know more about how they can get involved. Like Tyson said, come on out this Saturday and on Saturday the 27th, because there is no other volunteer activity and or direct voter contact that we can do to, help elect Democrats from the local level all the way up to the White House by knocking on doors. Because studies show that for every 30 doors that we knock in your average minivan packet or list number, so to speak, will confirm the vote of one additional vote for our Democratic candidates. And for any listeners who, maybe are not in Hoke County and or want to maybe swing by some neighboring counties such as Scotland County at some point, well, you can learn more about all of our canvasses happening across the state if you go to our link tree. That's knock and see. As the ending of it, you could also reach out to me as this regional organizing director for Central North Carolina, and I would really look forward to reaching out to your local county party. As politics is local, I got my start, I forgot to mention earlier, by calling up my county party office here in Clayton in December of 2019 and asking, how could I get involved? And the rest is history. So really making sure that we are, building, engaging at the local level. This is what I would encourage. And I just won't wait to knock on doors with you all on Saturday.
Here. And thanks for that statistic. For every 30 doors, one vote. I mean, if we can do that, man, from now until November, we're going to that makes definitely a huge difference. And in the county with our, voter universe being, under 30,000, that's big. Like, you can make a lot of difference between now and November. So I'm excited. I'm there was a lot of heavy stuff to, this conversation, but, bottom line is things are trending up for us, and we have the organization, we have the money. Our presidential candidate is under investigation or having to go to trial for anything. So look, I'm going to take my odds and roll with it
as well. All right. Well, to our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to follow us for more discussions on the policies and people shaping North Carolina's future. Until next time, stay informed and keep striving for a better tomorrow. Good night, y'all.
Thanks, y'all.